Hi everyone, it is Maya Lotz from the Energy for Life Wellbeing Practice, and I am your host for the Ocean of Abundance podcast. In this series, Crossing the Ocean of Grief, I am joined by the owner of Inspired Life and grief coaching practice, educator, author, and speaker, Sandy Lotz-Weiner. In each episode, we will look at different aspects and topics related to grief. In today's episode, I talk to Sandy about what motivated her to write her book and to become a grief coach and educator. We explore what the different types of grief and losses are, look at why someone who has experienced loss and grief needs support, and explore needs and tasks of grieving, as well as taking a peek at Sandy's unique Life Raft model and its 4 phases. Our session starts and ends with short practices that you can adopt as tools to help you navigate your own journey of loss, grief, and life. Welcome, Sandy. It's so lovely to have you here again today.
Hi, Maya. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for this podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure. Sandy, I thought I would ask you to start our session today with a small practice before we start our chat, a tool our listeners can begin to use in their daily lives on their own grief journey.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. One of the first things that I would share with somebody that I work with is some form of breath work, because that is something that is available to us at any time. And it just centers us from the busy lives and the distractions back into this room. So let's do 3 rounds of breathing together. I like to think people who breathe together heal together by putting our one hand on our chest or our heart chakra and one on our abdomen. And what I like to do is to just make sure that I'm sitting upright, my feet on the ground, comfortable. And I like to close my eyes, just settle into your body. And then we're going to breathe 3 rounds. We'll be inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. And I like to focus my attention with the inhale to the top of the crown. And then as I inhale, the breath goes to my feet and back up. And it's kind of like a sweeping action on your chakras. So hand on the heart and one on the abdomen. Close our eyes, soften your gaze, unclench your jaw if you feel tightness over there. And then softly we just start with an inhale. In through the nose and out through the mouth. We're going to do 3 rounds, so 2 more. And out, in and out. And slowly open your eyes. I hope that felt soothing. What I like about putting the hand on the abdomen is you can make sure that you're doing a full inhalation, not just in the chest or the upper chest, but basically going straight into the belly part. So many times we just hold our breath and we breathe very shallow, and that adds to our distress. So how are you feeling?
Wonderful, grounded. That's a great way to start off our session today. Sandy, you felt called to write your book, Crossing the Ocean of Grief, and to become a grief counselor and educator. What was your main motivation behind this, your why, as it were?
Thanks, Maya. Thanks for that question. Yes, when you're going through your own grief and you understand that you need a lot of support, right? And it's not always that easy to find the support at your fingertips. So when I lost Tony, which was 2017, was before the big COVID pandemic, which in a way highlighted grief and loss to the broader public. And it's after that more support systems came on board, and now it almost feels like we're talking about it more openly. But if we go back before that, people were kind of on their own trying to figure this thing out. And so I realized that even with my background in pharmacy, medical world, and having lost our parent at 23 and having come through that, when Tony passed away, it was a completely different experience. I was ill prepared. Not that you can prepare for grief, but I struggled. And so I went searching for my answers, read every book, Googled everything I could Google. And somewhere in this process, I realized, well, if I was already a coach, so if I'm struggling, I can't imagine if this is your first experience or you're younger. It must be a very, very daunting task. So I knew that I wanted to help people because this is the loneliest of lonelies. And nobody should feel this isolated. And it's not that we don't have support. Oh, everybody's got friends, family, maybe a church, or colleagues at work. but you're in this alone still. It's still your grief. So even though we're surrounded by people, we can feel very, very lonely. So I wanted to get that information out there that they shouldn't give up, because it would be very easy to just decide it's never going to get better. This is it. And I didn't want that to go out into the world, because I believe that there is another chapter, and it's about getting through and doing whatever it takes to get on the other side of these waves of emotion back onto dry land so that you can rebuild another chapter. And part of it was my own quest to find the answers for myself. I knew that I needed to understand grief. So that was the educational part. I read and read and read. I needed to figure out, how's my body responding? Why is this happening to me? And once we know that other people have had similar situations, similar reactions, you start to relax a little bit and open yourself up to healing modalities and possibilities. You need hope. You need hope that you're going to get better. And I think that's the essential message that needs to go out there to everybody that's going through this.
As you spoke, it made me realize that there's a underlying theme here, two really that come to mind. The one is our need for connection. And the other one is asking for help. And they're two themes that run right through life, but speak very loudly in our loss. And with that, I wanted to ask you, what is grief? What is loss? Are there different types?
I will answer that question for you in a second. I'm going to just circle back to what you just said. You're so right, because we actually heal in community. We do have to do our own work, of course, but there's something healing about telling our story, and I'll come to that a little bit later with the needs of the grieving. It's about telling our story to somebody to be witnessed, right? And so you need a witness for that. So connection is really important, and community will help us heal. So that's also why people, if they can find the support in the communities, their progress will be better. Currently, I'm working with hospice of Central Coast of Monterey, and I've learned that because they've had support before their loved one passed away, because these are people that are dealing with diagnoses in advance, right? That it's an end stage something. They seem to have a different journey through the grieving process because they've been prepared and they knew they had support. It's so different from people who have a sudden death experience like I had, where there isn't a prep period or you don't have the facility on tap. And so if we can get early support to somebody, their journey will be so much different than somebody that probably only finds the right support on maybe 6 months, 8 months out. And the other part of your question, or the statement that you made, was about asking for help, which is a life lesson for all of us. And it's hard to ask for help. Most of us have even grown up with tough it up, tough it out. So that's the counter message of not asking for help, right? And so I had a lady that I was sharing that it's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. And she stopped mid sentence and she looked at me and she said, wow, I've never thought of it like way, because I was brought up the other way, right? Asking for help meaning it's weakness. So to give people permission to go and look for it as far as and as wide as they need it, and earlier, as early as possible, so that they can get through this easier. Not that it's ever going to be easy, but it's more healing for them, right? Okay. So loss can be anything that I had a significant relationship with, right? So it could be a person, it could be even a place, or it could be a thing. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a person. I have identified with this, and I had a very close relationship with that item, person, or place. And normally we can, in a nutshell, describe grief as the change that I didn't want. So there's a lot of changes in life, and sometimes those changes are positive. But even in a positive change, there could be a grief because part of that change was something that I didn't want, like a side effect of my choice or my decision. We know the obvious losses, losing a loved one, But let's think here for a minute of, say, for instance, you do a positive change for a promotion, but you have to move states. So that part of the change you probably didn't want, the part where you have to leave people behind. So that might, even in the positive changes of life, they could be loss and they could be grief. So grief is actually a theme that runs through our lives. It's just when it's a big loss, a significant loss, like the 5 Ds: death, divorce, disease, downsizing, or disasters, that it's on a different magnitude and it really hits us with much bigger impact.
I hear you. And it's interesting because I bumped into somebody this week, and actually her divorce is quite a few years ago. But she also thought she had to tough it out. And then it really hit her once the fuss was over and the legal papers were over, and a year or so, or maybe even two, had passed. And she tried really hard just to go on as normal. And now she's at a place where she actually needs trauma counseling because she didn't deal with the emotions or didn't get the support in the beginning. So it's interesting that you say, death, divorce, disease, downsizing, disasters, and that very important sentence that grief is a thread that runs through all our lives, all the time. Obviously, it is highlighted when we lost a loved one or there's a big event in our life. But yeah, it is one of those themes that's there. It's ever present in our day. So I heard you mention something about needs of grief and tasks of grief. Can you unpack those for us a little bit?
So I like to use those in the beginning. This is strange, but when I was in my grief with Tony, my mind was still in the, okay, what do I have to do phase, right? And so there's obviously in grief, there's not to do, there's to feel and to explore that and to acknowledge. But for some reason, having been given the 6 needs of the grieving for my mind, it was very soothing to know that there is actually a little checklist. And the tasks of grief made so much sense to me because you're sitting in this, what do I have to do? Right? That's who we are as people. What do I have to do? And we need a starting point. And so that's why I like sharing that with my clients. And so I studied with David Kessler, the grief specialist, and he's a remarkable man. He also worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who started with the 5 stages of grief. And although that has changed over time, that was kind of the prototype for the grief work. And as we learn more and share the healing modality of how to work with grief, is growing exponentially, and I love that. And this is really how we're going to learn. And we are now at that space where the anecdotal stories or the griever's experience put onto paper or in a book is actually being explained scientifically. And to me, that is where we start to make real progress in this world when science and experience meets. And I love that, coming from a medical background. But back to the 6 needs of the grieving. So I have to give credit here to David Kessler because he was the one that have formulated this. In fact, the 6 need of the grieving, which has to do with meaning, was the premise of his book, Finding Meaning, which is one of the books that really changed my life tremendously and set me on this journey of wanting to do the work and getting certified. So the 6 needs of the grieving in a nutshell would be: one, to have your pain witnessed. That is one of our biggest needs, especially in the beginning. Because, when you have a broken leg, there's a lot of fuss. We're going to take you to the doctor, take you to an ambulance. People are surrounding you with a lot of stuff. You get a cast, then you get physical therapy. You've got to be off work for so many days. When we have a loss, there are no signs or symptoms necessarily on the outside. How do we show you what it feels on the inside? So the only way for it is to be witnessed is for us to speak or to share. Some people will show tears, other people want to talk. We have different ways of wanting to share that. So that needs to be witnessed over and over. And so we need more than one person, more than one set of ears. And that's where support groups and support people and counselors and coaches can help tremendously. The second one is to have a place to express our feelings. We need to be able to express our feelings, and they're all valid, although they're not real. I mean, they're not fact, but they are valid for us. They might not sound realistic to somebody else listening to us, but it's real for us, and we need a safe place to express that. We also need to be released from the burden of guilt. A lot of us will do like a revision of what could I have done at the time of the death, but also in the relationship. You would review the relationship, and you would sometimes you can come up with guilt. Could I have done more? Could I have done it different? Could I have done it better? That's a constant little phrase that runs through your head from time to time when you look back, at the relationship. Did I have to say that on that day? Could I have showed up differently? And so we need to distinguish between what is mine and what was not, because sometimes people can make an assumption around the death of their loved one that it might have been partly their fault, which is not entirely true. So they need to be able to figure that out and release that guilt. And once we're in a season of loss or we're going through grief, if we have old wounds that's still there, which they always are, we might think that we're over something from the past, an older grief, an older loss, but it's very common for that loss to come back and show up in the fresh grief. So, for instance, when Tony passed away, I remembered some things about our dad passing away. And so those other open wounds will show up, and we also have to separate other losses and other wounds. We call it gray grief. It's layered on top. All the things that you've experienced, other traumas, other grief gets layered on top of the present one. And you have to work through all of those. It's another opportunity to heal an older wound and to let go of it, but it catches you by surprise if it shows up in a fresh grief or a fresh loss. And we need to learn to integrate the pain and the love. The pain is there, and we have to embrace that and work through that. But ultimately, on the other side of all the pain and the painful memories of their demise, there's only love. And we want to get back to the loving memories, not the traumatic parts of losing somebody. And with time, that is possible if we work through, like you were talking about the lady that got divorced. Once we work through all those unmet needs and the unexpressed emotions, and she works through the trauma, she's going to get back to a possibility of, loving the present and being completely present in a life that she could create for herself, that she can love again. But we have to let the pain dissipate, right? And my other favorite part, and this is probably the one that set me, like I said, on my journey, was to find meaning. What is my life about after a significant loss? It could be quite devastating for some people. It could be their entire livelihood that's gone, their family's gone. What is that next chapter about? Sometimes it's a disaster and they survive. You have to go through, why am I still here, right? You have to find some meaning to make the next chapter have purpose for you. And that's going to take time. There's never meaning in losing the person. There's meaning for us in the life that we can create for ourselves and what we want to do, because we change when we go through deep loss and grief. We change our relationship with life. We change as people. It's impossible to go through a deep grief and loss without changing as a person. And there is also the potential for us to possibly grow. Now, this is not something that we address early on in grief, because first we have to get through some of those difficult parts. But it is a portal for change. And that next chapter is going to require us to think differently, to strategize differently, to look at life differently. So there's a little bit of an opportunity for growth already starting. And that is the beauty of making it through and getting to the other side and creating a new life after a significant loss. Before I go on to the task, yeah, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
I wanted to say that I was listening to you go through the steps, and then you got to find meaning in life after loss. I thought, what a beautiful circle that is. You're going through this event, you're addressing the trauma, the pain, you feel the feelings, you express them, you release, you free, you integrate, and then you're right back at that age-old question, who am I? Finding meaning in life. And this in philosophy and in my yoga journey, that was the question where I realized at a tender teen, this is my world. Who am I? And we're going to ask that question again and again. And so it was absolutely beautiful when you got to that sixth need. And it's like, there it is again. It's like after a significant time, when certain things have been worked through, then you are back to that place where you say, who am I and who am I now, after or before or dot, dot, dot.
Right. And so for me, it's the going back to what I've learned from homeopathy, studying homeopathy. It's like it's peeling an onion, right? Healing is peeling an onion. And so we keep on peeling away. And then who am I now? I become a new version of me after all these experiences that I go through in life.
And I think the other thing there is that it goes back to the I. So there's an external thing that happens outside of me, and then I begin to first I look for witnessing and I want to express, and then slowly, slowly we make our way back to the I. So that external thing did happen, and I need to process that, and then I can return to I and doing the inside work, which is a nice segue to go on to the 4 tasks of grief.
Right. And so the external being the stimulus, something happens externally, and then we go on an internal journey, right? And then we become. Okay, so the 4 tasks of grief or the tier model. I'm so grateful for the person that I went to when I was in grief. And the universe is amazing. I got in by default. My late friend that passed away during COVID, she gave me her name, and on a whim, I called her and she happened to have a cancellation that day. I mean, I was beside myself at that point and she was just available, but it worked for me. And so she gave me this little sheet that was called the tier model or the 4 tasks of grief. And this is kind of based on the work of a man called William Warden's, his grief model, but hers is an extraction of that. So T stands for to accept the reality of the loss, and E, which is the E of tear, experience the pain of loss. A, to adjust to the new environment without the person or thing, and R, to reinvest in a new reality. So there's your full circle again. You can't go to the A before you got to the T. You have to accept the reality of that loss. And unfortunately, you have to experience the pain. Then we adjust to life without that person or the new environment or the new landscape. And that is a journey on its own. And then we reinvest in our new reality. Who am I now? What do I want from life now? What are my needs now? Because all of those things will change. And it's not we said full circle, and I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy little full circle, perfectly done, and then you put a bow on top of it. No, this kind of work is messy and it's not linear and it's not logic. But there is some underlying pattern or rhythm to it, and it does come full circle, but not just on a particular day. You get pieces and glimpses of it during your journey. It's almost like walking a maze. You turn a couple of a corner and you go like, oh, I think I'm out of the woods. And then you hit another dead end. And that's kind of how grief is. You move through it and you hit a lot of dead ends and new beginning. It's an evolving thing, but so is life, right? It's forever changing because you're doing your grief work while the bigger world life is also changing. So you're doing your own internal shifts and changes, and you're still navigating a world that's forever changing. So there's more than one circle at the same time, is what I'm saying.
Talking about more than one circle. So, listening to you now, it really struck me when Tony died. You were in America and your loved ones, us, we're in South Africa. We were not there to witness, we were not there to really hear. We've got this massive time difference, so it makes it always difficult to find a convenient time to speak. And it really struck me why the need to write the book and why you had to do it, because you and Tony, this was your together dream to go to the US, and then half the dream died in a manner of speaking. So there was these multiple layers. Plus, in having a loss, I often think, like I had a thought the other day, and I thought, I just want mom. I just want to talk to mom. And I mean, mom's passed away for many years, and she was unable to communicate for years before that. But it is that need when certain things happen where the ones who understand you best, even though you might not always see eye to eye. What does Ram Dass say? Think you're enlightened? Go spend time with your family. So it is, but at the same time, those people who you want that. So it really struck me how for you, all these layers and circles, they're all happening at the same time. And I can see that, yeah, this urge to write this book, to navigate crossing the ocean of grief. And with that, give us a little sample of how you came up, or a little overview of your very unique Life Raft model and how you crafted your own Life Raft through your journey.
Okay, thank you. There's so much there that I want to respond to. And I want to say that I think you're right. The fact that I did not have close family in the States, there was this need to actually write the book, I think. It had to come through me. Now, not everybody that is going to lose somebody is going to want to write a book. I get that. But I think for me, it was, Tony and I were here on our own. So he was the person that I experienced the States with. And all of a sudden, that person is gone. It's almost like that chapter really happened of my life, That's part of us also wanting to speak about the people that we've lost, because our relationship continues, and we really want to speak about the people that we've lost. That's not over, but for a lot of people, they don't go there, and so that's kind of difficult for the person grieving. If you've lost a child, you want to continue talking about your child, and to find the right people that can hear that and go there with you. And yeah, I think that was my part of my reason for writing the book, to share it with my family that is so far away in a different way, and mainly to motivate people to go and get help early on in their grieving process, and also to know that they're going to need different support as they journey through grief. In the beginning, it's a lot of what I would call triage work. It's like if there's something happens, the EMTs are coming and the ambulance and the fire. And then when they leave, that's gone. Then there's more support needed because this person is still going through stuff. Then we need the softer support or the ongoing support. And that's where groups and counselors and coaches come in, because we're going to live with this loss forever, right? And so we need support along the way. But your question was not that. Your question was about my life raft. So let's go back to, how did I come up with this concept? So Tony and I came to the States in 2003. We used to say, two of us arrive, two suitcases each and a pocket full of dreams, right? And that's pretty much it, and a work visa for one of us. And so you don't really have a blueprint or a master plan. You have a lot of faith and hope, and I guess courage on some level, although at that point I didn't think we had it. Courage. We were just doing this thing. So as things unfold and you start to find yourself in this new landscape and everything is different, there's a lot of stress and anxiety. You have to requalify, you've got to find your feet, you've got a lot of stuff with immigration. And I had this recurring dream of falling out of a boat, finding ourselves in the middle of the ocean, the two of us, and the waves are coming, and we are like shipwrecked and surviving in the ocean. And we have to find a life raft. And in my dream, we have to get this life raft done. Anyway, so fast forward, to Tony's passing in 2017, I remembered this dream in the beginning, and I realized I need a life raft, right? We need to go back to this life raft. And so I crafted a life raft for myself, knowing that this time I'm paddling on my own. And so a lot of it is internal work because, yes, we need the external. I would take anything that I can hold on as a flotation device in the early stages of my grief and even later in my grieving journey. But I needed an internal one because so much of this work is inside work, solitary work, and we are most of the times on our own. And even if I tell you how I feel, nobody can really know what it feels like except me because I live my grief and my loss, right? And so my days were spent by early in the morning, you'd wake up and you would be in this like fog of the grief. And I did what I call internal landscaping. Quiet time to just sit and figure out what's going on. So my life raft has 4 stages. And my first stage of the life raft was mindful awareness. There's the first thing I have to do is become aware of what's going on, what has happened, what am I feeling, what am I thinking, what do I have to do. Now, in early grief, that is overwhelm in capital letters. Either that or none. It's going to look different at different stages, but I do need to know and I do need to be aware of what's going on, what's coming up for me on the inside. And so the mindful part for me is about slowing down. You can't rush, and not everything is a crisis type of action. A lot of the grief work is slow journey. It's like swimming through mud or skiing uphill. It feels like it's slow, challenging work. And so we need to be mindful to slow down and just pause a little bit to address our needs. So that's why my first step is mindful awareness. And it's only if I can go through that step over and over and over on a daily basis that I could possibly sit with something that I have to accept. Not maybe the big acceptance, but in that day, what do I have to accept today? And that second phase I called graceful acceptance because we don't want to accept the inevitable when you lose a loved one. You don't want to. It takes a while for our brains to comprehend what happened, but even longer for our bodies to release some of those emotions and for our heart to accept. That is a longer journey. So graceful acceptance is the phase 2, and it's about not kicking and screaming, trying to soften and trying to be compassionate with yourself, not to judge too much, to help us soften into the acceptance of what has happened. And then the third stage would be committed willingness, because at some point we have to make some changes and we have to maybe let go of certain items, or we have to find a strategy for ourselves to survive, right? So that period, you might have to do things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, something that you haven't done before. A lot of the things you're going to do is things you haven't done before. So there's a lot of fears and resistance that can come up. But the only thing that will get you through is if you can commit and be willing to do what it's going to take. And in my book, I was walking one Sunday with my friend, and I was saying to her, I would do anything to feel better. She's a therapist. She told me that is the thing. If you are willing to do something to feel better, that's the key that's going to unlock everything for you. Because we tend to want to give up or accept or feel like this is never going to get better. We go in these absolutes. It's never going to get better. I'm never going to feel different. And those things are going to keep us stuck, right? But we have to commit, not just be willing. We have to commit with taking action, right? And the only way to show that you're willing is to actually take some small action in changing something about your life to move yourself through the challenges of the next stage of your grief. And that I believe that if you go through 1, 2, and 3, you can get back onto dry land, onto secure feet, onto a place where you can actually have some more stability under you. It's not just a life raft in the water. You're now on solid ground. You've pulled your little life raft onto the beach. You might not have really gotten somewhere, but you're out of the deep waters, right? And so my fourth stage is inspired living. And that's where you can actually start practicing the actions and rebuilding and strategizing. Even if it's a temporary space for you, some people are going to continue on their journey and move forward. But for that period, you create for yourself a safe structure and foundation that you can start building that next life, the next chapter of your life. So that really sums up my four phases or stages of my life raft that I'm going through. And Maya, you can use this for anything, not just for grief. Obviously, I started with it when I was in crisis and anxious about immigrating to the States. And I've actually used the same model when I'm going through a difficult, challenging time, even if it's a positive. I used it when I was writing the book because there comes a time that it's hard going back into the emotions to write about the book, right? To write the story in the book. And I can't do it, or it's too difficult. And I would use my little life raft and go like, okay, so what am I aware of? What am I mindfully aware of right now? What do I have to accept? Okay, what am I willing to do to move forward? And so I use that same little life raft model, or it doesn't really matter what the challenge is. You have to be aware, and then you have to accept the things I cannot do. Back to the serenity prayer. I have to accept what I can't change, and change what I can, and then be willing to move forward.
As I was listening to you, I thought, yes, it is. It is a life raft model. So it is not only for grief; it is to be in life. So it can be used in grieving. It can be, as you say, used in other situations. And it very much struck me when you were busy with phase 1 and 2 that it's a compassionate model. So this is that we are very much talking about more and more in the world about people needing to have self-compassion and self-care and self-love. And so this is a very compassionate model towards self.
Yes, and we're always going to have challenges, whether we're in grief or in life, or when we're in life, we can be in grief. I was just reading this morning something from a book that I really love. It's written by Melody Beattie, old book actually. It's called Journey to the Heart, Meditations on the Path of Freeing Your Soul. And she was explaining that if you stand on a mountaintop, it's not just the mountain. There's mountains, and in between mountains there are valleys. So life is full of mountains and valleys. But for some reason, if we are only choosing to chase the mountain, the top of the mountain, then we are ill prepared for the valley. But if you accept that life has got all of those, then you can travel through the landscape a little bit different, right? When you're in the valley, it's not just valleys. Kind of like we're in grief, it's not just loss. At some point, there's going to be a mountain again. For me, that showed up when I found myself stuck with inverted commas, in certain emotions, for instance, or you get to the part where you just feel like you're not making progress because our brains like to make progress, right, or track. And I realized that if I'm sad, say I'm depressed, I'm just like blah, nothing is happening, and I just feel like blah. Nobody likes that feeling. We like something to change or happen or movement. But I realized that if I'm happy, that's it, when you've had a relationship and you were happy in that relationship, in the happy times, you never thought, I'm so tired of being happy every day. That's never even crossed my mind. It's only when it's an emotion that I do not want that I start to phrase it in I'm stuck now. Nobody complains about being stuck in happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just that I think we're so conditioned to want to go for the peaks and the mountains and the happies that if we can change our relationship with the valleys, then it might even be softer and easier for us in the long run.
I think that something else that just came up is like I'm back to bumping into this person I know in the supermarket, and when I was chatting with her and I showed her kindness and compassion, she said, "Oh no, you're going to make me want to cry. I want to cry." And she apologized, and I was like, "Sure, I understand the context perhaps inappropriate. But even in more intimate circle, we, others, myself, we say, "Oh, I'm so sorry I cried," or "Oh, I want to cry." And it made me think that we're in this society, the media that comes at us and the social media, it's all about the peaks. It's all about the mountaintop. That's sort of, that gets a medal, that gets a wow. But we have a whole range of emotions that everyone experiences. And we have kind of outed it now, and we do use the term toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is not going to get you through grief or life. There is the acceptance of a whole range of emotions plays out through the day. But when you resist any of them, that's where the struggle and that's where the sense of stuckness comes from. And by being aware of where do I feel a bit of grit, that's often where ooh, there's work to be done in this area because I want to resist this. And if I lean into it, then it shifts. Yeah.
Right. And tears are sacred, Tears are expressions of love on some level. You love and you've lost something that you love. For me, I've become really comfortable when you're in deep grief and you allow yourself to cry. You become almost professional at it. When somebody cries in my company, I feel extremely honored. Maybe in the beginning, when we were younger or inexperienced, feel uncomfortable with somebody crying. But I've learned to realize that people don't cry unless they feel safe. People won't really cry in front of people if they don't feel safe in their company. And so I think that's an honor. You know what I mean? It's like an honor that I can hold that space for you. And tears are healing.
I call tears balm for the soul. Once somebody spontaneously burst out in tears in my arms, and afterwards she apologized. And I said to her, trees need rain, and this is balm for your soul. Just like, we need the rain. Your soul needs the tears. It doesn't only need the laughter and the joy and the range of emotions to grow and to feel alive, because we also cry for joy. When beautiful things move us, they're tears. And you write about the safety. I was thinking the person is being witnessed, and very importantly that there is this safe space when a person cries in your company, something in them registered, this is a safe space, even though it may be a so-called inappropriate space in that moment.
Right. Which is, yeah, it's what an honor to witness somebody opening up about their deepest wound. What an honor.
Absolutely.
And how healing for them to feel the space that you can hold. And we can all do that, by the way. We don't have to be professionally trained. We know that as humans. We know how to hold space for our loved ones and even strangers. Getting back to what you were saying, I didn't have somebody to witness my pain. Well, the kindness of strangers can take you a long way. That is so amazing, and that's one of the great parts of the experience that you learn, especially being like far away from my birth country. The kindness of strangers are undervalued. So when you think, oh, they won't notice, or they don't know me, or it won't matter, no, it will. Any little kindness that you can give a stranger, a smile, can mean the world to somebody who's in deep grief or just having a difficult time.
Yeah, with familiars, we have all these other subtexts and stories running, and expectations even, script. But with a stranger, there is no other script, there's no other agenda. So sometimes it is almost easier for a stranger to bear witness when we are in those deep overwhelm moments. It's an interesting.
Right. Sometimes it's even a situation where you won't see them again. So you can be
Yeah.
really honest with your emotions. And I'm not saying oversharing. I'm just saying you can really be honest because they hold nothing. It's not going to affect them, whatever decision you make. They're not attached to you like family or close friends. They can just be a neutral witness for you at that time. And that's amazing.
Yeah, because I think that what comes into play when there is a previous relationship, be that family or old friend or whatever, is that, as I say, there's a narrative that runs. And then with the narrative come expectations. That person ought to know what I need now. We do that. Whereas with the stranger, as you say, sometimes that person that you're not going to become best friends and you're not going to go and have tea. It's just a chance encounter. Sometimes you can share in a way that really allows you to bear witness to yourself by sharing with that stranger.
Yeah, and you don't have to be concerned about putting it politely, you know what I mean? Because you don't have a history with them. You're not going to over censor yourself. You're just going to be raw and real.
Okay, so as we're getting to the end of our podcast, is there any last things you want to share before I ask you to close for us today with a small practice that just helps us all ground and get on with our day again after maybe touching on some painful areas?
I'm going to go back to the why. Why do I do this work? Why did I write the book? And it's basically to help people get support. Really, that to me is the main thing. And I want to share that it's never too late. Like you were saying, somebody had a divorce and now she's going through difficult time. It's never too late to start doing any of this work. And it's never too early to start doing any of this work. And wherever you are in your grief journey, if you feel that you want to expand your support system, now is the time to do that because that's your awareness, right? Coming up for you. So honor that and just reach out and see what you can do to find additional support. And it's going to be different in the different phases. Early grief, we're overwhelmed with emotions and need. And people almost need to help us take care of ourselves. But later on, we get into the lonelier phases. So there, the needs are very different. Or the readjustment phase to a new lifestyle. There, you need a different set of support. So we're forever evolving our support system because the same people can't be everything for you or stay the entire journey. They have lives to go back to. So that's my main message that maybe support is just something we become comfortable with creating for ourselves. And that's maybe what I would want to leave as a final message. You know, the sad thing is there is a statistic that people can wait up to 5 years to get support, and that's a long time because we might think that we've got it. Like I said, we'll walk a maze, right? And I think I turned a corner and then I hit a wall. That's okay. Just find more support.
Beautiful. Will you guide us in a small practice before we close?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to teach the 4-7-8 breath because that is something that I think is easy to learn. And it's something that people can use when they are overstimulated and they want to come down and be a little bit more relaxed in a day to day. It's something you can do when you go to bed at night. You're basically trying to get out of the sympathetic nervous system, or you're trying to regulate the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and you're trying to get your heart rate to go a little bit down and your breathing to slow down. And it's something we can practice. You know, we spoke about that in the previous podcast. People tend to try and find the tools in crisis, but we need to practice it so that when we are in crisis, it's like second nature. So let's do a 4-7-8 breath where we basically breathe in for 4, we hold for 7, and we exhale for 8. And that way we're slowing down our breathing and our heart rate and our stress levels. And we'll do 3 rounds of that. What does that sound like?
Perfect.
Okay, so comfortable seat once again, feet on the ground. Okay to close your eyes, maybe roll your shoulders a little bit like I've just done. Um, and we're going to inhale for the count of 4. So let's go. Normal breath, in and out. And then we go in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And slowly open your eyes and get back into the room. That was great, Maya.
Thank you, Sandy, for that beautiful practice. And thank you, listeners. Please follow the show if you're keen to hear future episodes. And please refer to the show notes if you'd like to get in touch with Sandy. Bye.
Bye, Maya. Thanks for a great podcast, and we'll speak to you next time.